You ever wonder what really separates a good thinker from, a truly brilliant one? It's not just about raw talent. Today, we're going to dig into the deliberate habits that can actually train your mind for greatness.
Right. It's the classic question, isn't it? We tend to assume genius is, something you're just born with, like you won the genetic lottery. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the answer is way more about training than just talent? What if genius is actually a skill that you can develop?
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to bust the myth of innate genius. Then, we'll get into how to train your brain like a muscle. After that, we'll explore the habits of deep and curious thinking. And finally, we'll map out a clear path for you to get started.
All right, first up, let's tackle the myth of genius. This is all about shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Okay, so look at this. It's a really powerful contrast, right? On one side, you've got the common myth. Genius is just a gift you're born with. But on the other side, that's the reality, backed by neuroscience. It says genius is actually a trained skill. It's something that's cultivated, built through effort, discipline, and, you guessed it, specific, repeatable habits.
So if genius is a skill, how in the world do you train for it? Well, that brings us to our next big idea: training your brain. The core concept here is to think of your mind as a muscle. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. Training the mind is similar to training a muscle. It's so true. I mean, just like lifting weights builds physical strength, right? Consistent mental workouts build cognitive power. And listen, this isn't just some nice-sounding metaphor. It's actually grounded in the science of how our brains work.
And here's the cool part, how it actually works. See, every single time you push your mind, you are physically reshaping it. No joke, you're building stronger, more efficient connections. What scientists call neural pathways. And those pathways are what let you process complex ideas faster and easier over time.
Okay, let's dive into our first big habit, the habit of depth. And this one is a little counterintuitive. It's about thinking slowly to ultimately go fast. In a world that is obsessed with speed, geniuses often do the opposite. They train themselves to slow down. Think about Darwin. He spent decades, just meticulously observing and thinking before he published his theory. The goal isn't just to think, it's to think deeply. And this habit really rests on two key pillars. First, you have to actually practice deep thinking. And second, you need to create the right environment for it, which usually means spending some time in solitude.
So, what does deep thinking even look like in practice? Well, it's a process. First, you slow down and really examine an idea from every possible angle. Then, you start asking those crucial why questions, digging way below the surface. And finally, you explore all the different possibilities, especially the ones that most people would just ignore. And that time you spend alone, that's what allows for what psychologists call reflective thinking. This is that quiet mental space. The space where someone like Isaac Newton, just sitting by himself, could connect a falling apple to the movement of the entire freaking solar system. Without all that constant noise and distraction, your brain finally has the space it needs to connect the dots and have those amazing aha moments.
All right, moving on to our second major habit, the habit of curiosity. Think of it this way. If deep thinking is the engine, then curiosity is the fuel. It's that active, driving force that just pushes your mind to keep learning and growing, nonstop. And this breaks down into three core pillars. It all starts with getting high-quality input, which means reading widely and constantly. Then, you have to actively process all that information by questioning everything. And finally, you strengthen your mind by embracing mental challenges. See how they build on each other?
The real power of reading widely isn't just about cramming your head full of facts. It's about building a massive, diverse library of mental models. When you expose your brain to totally different fields, like science, history, art, it starts to make these really unexpected connections. Steve Jobs famously connected his study of calligraphy to the design of the very first Macintosh. That kind of cross-pollination of ideas, that is the bedrock of all innovation. And as you're taking all this in, you have to question it. Don't just passively accept information. A trained mind actively probes it. You have to ask things like, okay, why does society believe this? Or what evidence actually supports this claim? And is there a totally different explanation? This is the habit that prevents you from getting intellectually lazy and really builds those sharp critical thinking skills. And last but not least, you have to actively look for difficult things. I'm talking about the strategic depth of a chess game, a really tough math problem, or a rigorous debate. These challenges, they're like the mental equivalent of a heavy lift at the gym. It's the struggle itself that forces your brain to adapt, to grow, and to become stronger. Okay, so we've busted the myth and we've explored the core habits. Now let's pull it all together. Let's talk about your path forward and how you can actually start applying this stuff.
So here's your training regimen. And the key thing to remember is that this isn't just some abstract theory, okay? This is a daily practice. It's a commitment to practice deep thinking, to spend time in solitude, to read widely, to question everything, and to embrace challenges. This is how you move forward.
Look, the difference between ordinary and truly extraordinary thinking, it isn't some birthright. It's a matter of daily practice. It really is. It all comes down to the small choices you make every single day to challenge and grow your mind. So, the only real question left is, how will you train your mind today?